Hi, LA Progressive readers and friends. Dick and Sharon, back to you again from LA Progressive. Once again with our dear friend Peter Larman, who we worked with for years out here in Los Angeles on activist issues around racial justice and legal justice, and it took his activism to Providence, Rhode Island, where evidently he's still practicing it. How are you doing, Peter?
Doing good. Once you're in the groove, you never leave that groove because that's where the love is.
That's right. That's right. So today we're going to be talking about a piece that you sent to us, and we're so happy that you do, Peter, because you frequently talk about something that is not spoken of a lot. The name of it is Brownshirts in the Streets, and Where Are the Christians? So
Uh,
yeah, so talk to us a little bit about, why you wrote that and what it's about.
well, I had some reluctance to do this because I'm a Christian minister, and it's like, well, why is that guy in his high horse, and how dare he judge us? And he's asking where we are, but where is he? And yet there's a kind of odd silence now among Christian leadership. And I'm speaking now of leadership, the ministers, denominational officials, ecumenical council leaders, people like that who are, they're supposed to be shepherds. They're supposed to be leading their flocks in the right direction. And clearly, and they know this, they're supposed to be standing up for everyone belonging and for everyone being safe. And that's not happening at a time when so many people clearly are not safe. I think where increasingly none of us are safe. I use the strong expression, the brown shirts are in the street. I live near Boston, Massachusetts, and Boston fully expects to see tanks and armored vehicles soon enough because its mayor is one of the defiant ones, one of the ones who says, absolutely, we will not bow the knee. Well, that, of course, is a direct provocation to Stephen Miller, who is kind of running this show behind the scenes. And the other thing is that I was when I was young, I read about the example of the incredible Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany, who did, in fact, um, say at a certain point, enough is enough, and took an open and dangerous stand against Hitler, and ultimately was executed. Uh, and the reason Bonhoeffer's story is important is that had the German Lutherans, broadly speaking, which is about half the German population, not gotten in lockstep with Hitler in the 1930s, Hitler would not have probably, but not have been able to rise to power. So, there's this King expression, Dr. King saying there's such a time as being too late. And I think we're almost at that point. As structures collapse around us, and as clearly the courts aren't going to save us, the Democratic Party is not going to save us. I use an example. Why can't, for example, the Christians in my little state, we have a big detention center here in a place called Central Falls, one of the poorest communities in Rhode Island. Why don't we get the churches, and I pitched this, get the churches and the church leaders put on their glad rags, stand around that whole facility, lock arms, and say to the people who run it, well, if you're going to keep filling this up with people you're plucking off the streets, then you're going to have to arrest us too. Or right, people should stay in their lane and do what they can do. I mean, church people should do what they can do. Union members should do what they can do. Teachers should do what they can do. Or um, research the investors, since these are privately operated places. Research who's invested in that and go to their houses and cause trouble there. It'll get into the news, but people need to see in the news that we're not all passive. I mean, I compare us to other countries. In France, where you mess with the wages, you mess with the retirement system, you mess with anything, and millions are in the streets. Do
Yeah,
you know? Yeah, and
absolutely.
they stay there.
That's right. No, you said something just now that just kind of struck me that in the 19 in the early 1940s, before we went into World War II, that the German Lutheran Church had pretty much aligned themselves with Hitler. And I can see the parallels between the far right, white Christian nationals,
Oh, yeah.
who have aligned themselves with Trump. It's almost as if we have no sense of history. Don't we see how that all played out?
Well, you just said something. It's almost as if we have no sense of history. Sharon, what country are you living in?
I know Dick tells me this, honey, right? When we first got together and I would say, well, people know this or people know that. What would you tell me?
I asked if she'd been on the freeway and that there's a lot of not very bright people driving around, right?
Thanks. And I would stand him and I say, oh, no, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. People are aware of these things. And increasingly I'm seeing that my husband was right.
So I have a comment that I think I raised with you before. I mean, part of the issue, Sharon and I live on the northeast side of Los Angeles. And indeed, in our general neighborhood, there are gangs of thugs driving around in military vehicles, going into the Home Depot lots and beating up on people and arresting gardeners and going to schools and raising hell. But we also spend some time on the far west side, Santa Monica, and you know the west side of LA. And I don't think the people there feel it in all the same way. I mean, the danger there, as I said before, is you'll get run over by a Waymo. But you won't see a gang of thugs at a store beating up on people. And I think a fair number of people, they may hate what Trump is doing, but so far they're not touched by it.
And that's the genius of racism.
Right.
That is one of the ways that it functions to help support the growth of fascism.
Yes, racism and social isolation, and everybody repeats. Educated people always repeat that expression that's attributed to Martin Niemöller, but nobody quite knows if he actually ever said it. About first they came for the Jews, and they came for the trade unionists, and so forth. They repeat it, but they don't somehow believe it. Now, I think people who work in universities, big part of the West Side upper middle class have university connections. I think they sense something's going on because isn't Trump asking for $1 billion from UCLA? $1 billion. But you're right, Dick. Your basic point is right, and that again is strategic on the part of the Brownshirts. They're building these facilities, for example, in Nebraska and in places far removed from people who might come and actually surround them, right? Locking arms and what have you. I came across this the other day after I'd written this article, and I would have put it in, but with the new big beautiful budget, Homeland Security, ICE, this part of our country now has more money to work with than the military budgets of all but 2 countries in the world. Just let that sink in for a little bit. That, short of the military expenditures of this country and China, $170 billion, a lot of money.
It absolutely is.
And they're offering these big bonuses for people who sign up. And the more zealous they are, by the way, the more visible they are roughing people up in places, for example, where you live, like Paramount and out that way. The more they see people roughing people up, the more they're kind of like saying, "Oh, I could do that. That looks like fun."
Yeah.
So look what kind of person they're recruiting.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. So they've increased the sign-up bonuses, but I want to talk a little bit about the cities that Trump has already sent occupying forces to, and the ones that he is threatening to, because it appears I've heard these leaders characterized as low-hanging fruit. For example, Lisa Cook, who is the first Black Federal Reserve governor, and she's going through some issues with Trump right now, who is attempting to fire her. She's refusing to step down, but she's often characterized as being low-hanging fruit. And people like Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, and Mayor Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, and Mayor Ross Baraka, the mayor of Newark, who was actually rough-handled, manhandled, handcuffed, arrested. Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. Now, these are all major U.S. cities that all happen to have Black mayors, and they're all being characterized as low-hanging fruit. What do you think about that, Peter?
Well, God help anybody who looks at this and doesn't see the capital letters racism written all over it. I mean, we've talked about that. When Trump says crime, he means Black people, and he leaves no question about that. The cities, and some of them are smaller, in states controlled by Republicans. One of them, notably, is New Orleans, Louisiana. We're thinking about New Orleans these days because of Katrina. New Orleans has ghastly crime, especially high murder rate. But do you think Trump is interested in sending troops to Louisiana? No, that's where Speaker Mike Johnson comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And we could go down the list of similar places that have. If we're talking about violent street crime, that's higher than the cities you mentioned, Sharon. So what's operating here, again, right in front of our eyes is the Make America White Again subtext of everything this guy does.
So part of your article, a main part of your article, thrusts on the fact that in past times of great crisis in the country, the Vietnam War protests and the protests against Reagan's finagling in the Central America, the religious community, religious leaders were at the forefront of large-scale protests, and you don't see that happening much right now. And why do you think that is?
There are multiple reasons, Dick, and to be clear, I don't, you can't entirely trust your memory, but I do remember being involved in, for example, the anti-apartheid protests with religious people. Similarly, the work against the dirty war, we had a big network about that. And these networks go all the way back to the clergy and laity concerned about Vietnam group. Many of the same people were in each of these things. One thing that the religious community had going for it then was less fractionalization, and there were recognized people who could say it. William Sloane Coffin being a good example, could say, we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with this. And he would always do it with Rabbi Heschel, and he would make it an interfaith thing to the best that he could. Those leaders and those structures seem to have faded away. And then, there's of course, the carving out of the Trumpite part of the religious community, which is dramatic. If you look at white Protestants, but these were groups that weren't, that were on the other side of those other issues as well. So that's less important. A lot of the congregations themselves did badly during COVID. They never quite got back together. And then social media burrows in to what were once, I'm thinking of Southern California, what were once thought of, my days with Progressive Christians Uniting, thought of as progressive congregations that aren't so progressive anymore, because a significant part of them, often people with the money, are like, well, let's not be too hasty.
Yeah, so let's get on this topic of being too hasty. We were kind of walking around this issue a little bit before we pressed the record button. And I was telling you that in my life, I believe that I have been less negatively affected by overt racist people, either racist comments or racist behavior. I've been less affected by that than I have been by nice white people who may even be unconscious, may harbor unconscious racist feelings. And so I want to talk about, could this be a part of what's happening with the Christians not coming out, because the attacks are right now targeted at this low-hanging fruit. And so low-hanging fruit, what does that mean? It means people who don't have much power. Why don't they have much power? Well, because the powerful push them out to the margins, and nobody stands up and does anything about it. So let's talk about this. People who say they want change and say they support integration, but if you go in their neighborhoods where they actually live, you kind of don't see that. Well,
Yeah, an example would be, of course, this loops back to what you were saying before about the racist program. People who, as they're, and by the way, I just learned also that they made some arrests among people who were fighting a wildfire in Washington State. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no place they won't go. That's clear, right? And also the courts have now said, yeah, you can go into churches. So it has to touch people where they live. In the abstract, the fact that here in Rhode Island, a fair number of people have been rounded up at someplace else in Central Falls, which is a very different zip code from my own zip code. But the people in this zip code employ garden maintenance people who come from Central Falls. And when Juan doesn't show up on Friday, maybe they'll say, oh, but I like that guy. I mean, it actually comes to that. But yeah, the hyper segregation and social segregation that characterizes our country is not good. On the question of the impact on Black people, the impact of everything that this administration is doing on the Black community will be bigger by a factor of about 3 or 5 than it will be on any other community, right? Because it cuts across every issue. It cuts across legal representation in the courts. It cuts across, mass incarceration. It cuts across lifelines to education. All of that kind of thing, and yet. From the point of the many white liberals who have, in their workplace or wherever, or their academic settings, have seen Black people appearing, they think, well, what could possibly be wrong? Everybody's kind of still here. It hasn't fallen down. These are people actually who rarely have an honest conversation with a Black person to say what's going on.
Yes.
They nod, they smile. They're nice white people, as you say.
That's right.
They're also, to use the Kendi term, they're also assimilationists. They think Black people deserve a chance to prove themselves, as though there's something wrong with Black people, and with a little training and a little guidance, they might someday catch up to us. Anyway,
so the question is, I think, where do we go from here? I mean, you talked about either on this tape or before about the religious people of Providence, Rhode Island, or Rhode Island, going out to the detention center in the center of Rhode Island and forming a circle around it and daring ICE to arrest them too. And I think that's a noble effort, but I just wondered.
Well, it hasn't happened, Dick. I want to be clear. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. I mean, if we could get that far, I would be in heaven.
Yeah,
I understand, but then I think, well, would that really change anything about Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Corporal Vance? I mean, I'm puzzled. As much as I hate it, what Trump has done is very effective. This all the time, more all the time, in every direction. He captures the media all the time. And I love it that Gavin Newsom gets up on his front legs and barks back, and Pritzker and a few others, and maybe that'll lead to something. I desperately hope it will.
Here's what I think. And maybe this is a little bit naive, but I think if people show that they're show a little bit of courage, a little bit of black backbone, and if particularly if they're people who are respected and not the usual suspects. So if parents and children see their teachers taking a stand, for example, and saying, "Oh no, I'm gonna talk about diversity in the classroom. You're not gonna wipe this off my curriculum," and that's happening among the teachers and librarians who are risking their jobs and clergy. I mean, a lot of people, you know, if you're a good clergy person, you are supposed to be a priest, a prophet, and a pastor, and their primary relationship is a pastor. So, you know, so and so helped us a lot when mother was sick and when mother was dying, or so and so did our wedding. And now they're going out there. Something must be going on, you know? It changes the weather a little bit. I hope I'm right about that, right? I hope I'm right about that. It makes it more, it creates more space for other people to say, well, we shouldn't be putting up with this, as against simply watching it unfold. And I think for the vast majority of people, again, we're talking about, you know, the mushy middle, they're watching this unfold, and it's kind of like entertainment, you know, and Trump is a great entertainer. That cabinet meeting was a real classic, you know, 3 hours of sycophancy. It could have been in North Korea, you know?
I'm greatly heartened by news of kind of small scale resistances, companies not so small that say, oh no, we're going to keep our DEI program. We're not doing away with that. Or other things where they're going to talk about history as it really is. But I think we got off on such a terrible start when huge law firms gave billions of dollars to sing Trump's song. Major universities, Columbia and Harvard, that just kind of rolled over. I think we got off on a bad start. Now, I hope more organizations, I hope UCLA won't pay that $1 billion that Trump is demanding of him. And it's not only that his folks are demanding the money, they are demanding that they teach certain classes and they not teach other classes, which is just horrible.
So don't you think that these large organizations, the reason that they have as much money as they have is because they're really ruled by the profit, by the bottom line. And if that's threatened, they'll bend the knee. But I think that the people have much more of an obligation to stand together and take action. And I think that, I mean, like the No King's Day, that was something that people across, and in every state of this country, people got involved. I have hope that what's happening is people are taking their civic responsibility much more seriously, and they're understanding that there's nobody that we can rely on except for ourselves.
Right.
Well, and Sharon, if I can just put in a plug for you here, you published, and we are recording this on Thursday, what is it, 28th, yeah. You published an article in LA Progressive that really got to me because you talked about solidarity networks as a model of social organization that will save us if we ever get to it. Interestingly, that in the course of these protest activities and Indivisible and 5051 and the rest of them, you make friends. You find other people in these circles, and you start to form those networks, and you find somebody, for example, who is part of sustainable agriculture, or you know, and then you become involved in that and so forth. Those are the seeds of the future. I mean, it's not enough though, and this is again a big challenge to religious liberals. It's not enough to think good thoughts to make these connections and to forget about the struggle for power. We have to break the back of the oligarchy, and that is a very tall order. This time, it's not. It's if God willing, we can elect people who are not MAGA people. It's not going to be good enough because we came too close to the abyss. We at a certain point we absolutely have to say you can't buy and sell political power in this country the way you blatantly do now.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, right now it's just very obvious. And believe me, it's not just Trump who's put everything up for sale. I mean, this has been going on for a long time.
So I think last weekend or the weekend before last, we had a gathering at our home for our city council member, Amices Hernandez, who you know, Peter. You remember?
I know her well. A
Yes.
big woman in every respect.
Yes, she is. She's wonderful. And so we supported her in her first election.
Yeah, I remember.
She won to become, and she represents us. She's our city council member. And so we're supporting her again. And so that's one example of we need to understand big money is up against her because they don't like the policies that she supports. When you know this about your candidates, you've got to do everything in your power to stand behind them. You know, get your neighborhood together because the only way to defeat big money is with big people. Lots of people.
Yep. I can't say enough about that. In Boston, nearby, Michelle Wu, who's been a very good, very progressive mayor, unbelievably brilliant, and a tough-minded politician, is being opposed in the primary by Josh Kraft, the son of Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft owns the Patriots. He's a big Trumper. And Josh keeps saying, well, I'm not my dad. And, on the other hand, he keeps inviting his dad to his events. And I mean, I hope that, some residual class consciousness will sink this guy because he has unlimited funds to spend on his campaign. Even in our little town of Providence, our current mayor is, he's married to the richest real estate dealer around. They live in a fancy mansion. He's a nice person, but he listens to the developers, and he's being challenged by an upstart named David Morales, and I'm, supporting him and going to his things. I mean, we can actually get traction in these smaller venues in a way that we can't in the big picture, or at least it's hard to. I mean, how many of us were invited to the recent meeting of the Democratic National Committee? Did you go?
Right.
Yeah.
Like we ever would. But yes, Peter, this is, I think, where we have room to grow and to learn how to take power back, and that's at the lower levels. And I think we still actually need to work on reform of the structure itself. And that was one of the things that I addressed in my article. I don't know if it's possible for us to have a working democracy if we continue to operate the United States with an electoral college or with the ability to gerrymander. These kinds of things always result in average people losing power.
Yeah, you mentioned in your article that Wyoming senators have as much power as California's, and Wyoming doesn't have 800,000 people. I was grateful that you didn't mention Rhode Island, which is only slightly bigger than Wyoming in terms of population, because I think, my friend Sheldon Whitehouse would be offended. But yeah, I mean, that again, this is the only so-called democracy in which in presidential elections you can lose the popular vote and become president because of the electoral college. It's the only supposed democracy in which the upper chamber of the legislature is hobbled by the filibuster rule, so that even if you have a majority, you really don't have a majority. It's another chamber where minorities elect the senators in the different states. The blatant gerrymandering, the unrestricted money. I mean, it's a shit show. I'll use a theological term. It's a shit show.
It is. And it's so complex. Go ahead, sweetheart. I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
Well, I was saying, I mean, I still hold considerable hope that we will recover ground in the upcoming midterm elections, provided Trump doesn't actually get away with stealing them altogether. And as one sign in that, in Utah, there was a news story that a woman, a Democratic candidate, won the primary for the congressional district that covers Salt Lake City, and which would mean that one seat in Utah would actually be blue. Now it isn't over. She just won. It's going to be a runoff between the top two. But I have a feeling that a lot of people are deeply uneased. They may not be out in the street. They may not necessarily know what to do, but they're going to know when it comes time to cast their ballots. And I hope people will. I don't give up on the Democratic Party, or I don't give up on democratic methods. I think we need to pay attention to that as well.
We can't do it any other way. I mean, they have the guns. I mean, they have the firepower. The idea that, there's going to be a Shays rebellion kind of thing, or that the pitchforks are going to come out and they're going to surrender, not happening. I do think, and this is very difficult to say, but the economy, meaning the job market and people's investments and so forth, have been still relatively unruffled by this. It mystifies me that they have been so calm, but I can't believe that this will continue. That is to say, that at some point the destruction of the Federal Reserve Board, the inflation, the effect of the tariffs, it's gonna hit. Now, I don't wish suffering on anybody, but the way that Republican rule was ended in 1932 was that 1/3 of the people of the United States were hungry.
Absolutely.
Right? And half the people were unemployed, and they were mad. And so all over the country, people who'd never voted Democrat before got behind Roosevelt, and that was it was an incomplete revolution on account of racism, because he got votes from the Jim Crow South. But that said, it was in its own terms a revolution.
It was
Because
somewhat
Wall Street and the big money had run everything from the Wilson years for 12 years.
That's right. It was somewhat of a complete revolution, except that Roosevelt made concessions to the ultra wealthy, because he really wanted to maintain this capitalist system. And in doing that, what they were really trying to do was put down socialists. And there was a very strong socialism vein that was growing in the United States in 1932.
Well, and there was also, I mean, a very effective, for a long time, communist presence in the industrial unions and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true that Roosevelt was no Trotsky. He didn't talk like a Trotskyite. But in terms of an epochal change, it was an epochal change, and it probably saved us from an earlier version of fascism, because if he hadn't got it, the Father Coughlin's and the Huey Longs of his era, or the Henry Ford, could have seized power. It was that freaky.
Yeah.
So speaking of Shays rebellion, they don't always work out badly. She's big into Ancestry.com and uncovered that some distant relative of mine, a farmer in York, England, participated in a farmer revolt. And for his troubles, he was deported to St. Dimian's Island, which is now Tasmania, where he had to serve. He was essentially a slave for a while.
He comes from a long history of troublemakers.
But then he served his time, and he moved to Australia and married an Irish woman, and may have had a wonderful life.
Yeah, if you were white and got transported, and there millions were, you could conceivably, I mean, you were indentured for a certain point, but you could conceivably get out of it.
That's right.
And a huge part of the British realm was peopled by people who were troublemakers and potential troublemakers, and they were very good at putting people on ships and saying, "Off you go,
That's
have a good
right.
life."
Yeah, off you go to some other people's land.
Of course,
And, of
part of
course,
the deal.
yeah, it's been part of the deal. And while you're there, get rid of those other people.
So we're not going to end this conversation on a sour note
No,
or a note
good,
of defeat at all.
good.
I, you know, I wouldn't ask the question, "Where are the Christians?" if I didn't think some would hear that, right? Some would ask themselves, "Well, what am I doing really?" Um, within, again, within my capacity. Without, it's not very wise for a minister someplace who serves a local church to suddenly go on fire and denounce the president from the pulpit and so forth. When you get fired, you're useless, right? So the question is to find what you can do and always push the envelope a little bit and try to bring people with you. I didn't mention in my article the work of William Barber, Reverend Barber, and maybe I should have, because it's worthy. It's not exactly puny, but the fact that he is such a powerful thinker, speaker, and it didn't ignite the moral revolution he was hoping. He framed it in terms of renewing King's prophetic legacy. Told me, I mean, there are other issues in terms of how the organizing proceeded or didn't proceed in different areas. I know there are issues about the logistics of the operation and all that, but still, he issued a clarion call, and just a handful of people came to join him. Better than nothing. Better than nothing. I know people who are getting arrested now in solidarity with Gaza, Christians, but they're in such small numbers that it never breaks the news. It never gets into the news.
So one of the people that joined him is Liz Theo Harris.
Oh, yes.
Dr.
Yeah.
Liz Theo Harris. I was scheduled to have a similar conversation with her as the conversation we're having right now.
Right.
And I had technical difficulties. I could not get my mic to work.
Uh-huh.
I was so embarrassed. This is last week, and we haven't. We're going to reschedule. Very frustrating.
Yeah.
We're going to reschedule, but we're going to be talking about similar issues: the role of the Christian church, the role of faith, as we are on this crazy road to fascism.
That's good. She is so worth talking to. And her sister, Jean Theo Harris.
Yeah.
Harris. I mean, these are powerful people.
Yep.
Powerful thinkers.
Well, this has been wonderful, Peter.
Yes.
We can't wait to see your next article and get this one up and out with a newsletter.
Okay, and we're gonna close with a prayer for the Holy Spirit to descend with fire, as the New Testament says.
I like it.
I could sing the old song. I could sing the old song, "Revive Us Again," but I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
So long.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.